I had a recent discussion about my maternity leave. It is this notion, and our UK policy doesn't help because it sets it up this way, but it's not a woman's leave, it's a parent's leave, and it should be kind of seen that you share it. And I think I understand as a mother myself, I understand the kind of pull that I don't want to give up. But you're kind of only seeing the short-term picture. You're not seeing the bigger picture of what that sets up for the rest of your lives.
Hi, my name is Nadia Nagamutu, business psychologist, coach, speaker and founder of Avenir Consulting, which creates organisational growth and success via inclusion and diversity. We've been discussing the benefits that diversity brings to companies' bottom line performance for decades with more and more evidence. But there are so many questions organisations still have about how to achieve it. How do you create a culture where people feel valued for their uniqueness and the qualities they bring? I believe it's crucial to the future success and sustainability of every organisation that they find the answer to this question to make sure that each employee is not only supported but also appreciated. With this podcast, I aim to get some of the key challenges to creating inclusive workplaces out in the open and start uncovering the solutions to embracing a culture that cares for everyone. I'm going to be having conversations with some of the most inspiring people in different countries and across industries who are pushing the boundaries on inclusion and diversity in the workplace, from topics such as parenting in the workplace, ethnicity, age, gender, mental health, and all things inclusion. I want to create a movement to change society through sharing life experiences and creating more empathy and connection. Why care? I believe that once we have organisations and societies that accept and value everyone for who they are, we become healthier, happier and better in our roles both inside and outside work. Hello and welcome to episode 6 of my Why Care podcast. My name is Nadia Nagamutu and I am your host. What are the expectations of mothers compared to fathers? What's the impact of these gender stereotypes on our behaviour? And what role do organisations have in challenging these? What are the difficulties faced by modern-day blended family types trying to live within a traditional family framework? These questions and many more will be answered on today's podcast when I speak to my guest on the show, Dr. Laura Radcliffe. She has a PhD in organisational psychology and is currently a senior lecturer at Liverpool University Management School and the director of the Masters of Research programme. Her research looks at work-family practices, routines and decision-making, looking at the gender norms and the impact on organisational inclusion and diversity. Her research has been published in journals and is widely cited and applied in the business world. We delve into some fascinating psychological concepts such as intensive mothering, maternal gatekeeping, and the ideal worker, dissecting why gender norms are so fundamentally hard to shift. Finally, Dr. Laura Radcliffe explains what organisations need to do in order to challenge stereotypes and support everyone at work, no matter their circumstances or family type. Laura is a very good friend of mine. I personally find her knowledge, passion, and insight on the subject inspiring. Enjoy the show. Hello, Laura. Really, really great to speak to you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about this. It's something that I care a lot about, so...
Absolutely, absolutely. Something we both share a common interest in. I do enjoy our conversations because we're just so aligned in the research that we've both done, but also in our views. So I'm really excited to speak to you. Let's talk about Equal Lives because that was how we met, so it seems apt. We looked at different types of male carers at the time, and we were interested because a lot of the research seemed to be on sort of heterosexual relationships and less so on the fathers. So we really delved deeper into the experience for single fathers, for same-sex fathers, for main caregivers, and also those men who look after elderly relatives as well. So for me, it was really important at that time to get some depth of understanding of those different types of male carers. But can you elaborate a little bit more in terms of your thinking about why that's important?
Well, I think there's so many different reasons. Well, mainly we should just be learning about everybody's experience and not just kind of concentrating narrowly, or because then we're missing out on a lot. But really looking broadly at the issue, we need to understand meal care broadly, from whichever kind of angle we're looking at it, because there's a few reasons for that. Obviously, until more recently, there's been such a focus on working mums, and you kind of think if you talk about gender, it's about women. If you talk about family friendly, it's for, assumed for mums, even if kind of it isn't. And there's so much research historically on how women manage work and care and how women achieve a work-life balance. And the problem with that, while that's important, obviously, to understand, and it's good we've done that, it kind of implies that this is only a woman's issue, this whole trying to manage work and care. And then we're missing the whole other side of the equation. And that meant that we were really making assumptions about men and fathers rather than actually understanding their perspective. Just kind of assuming that they take on this role. And then it meant that men were being left out of these discussions often. And it has changed over recent years. There's now it's increasing the research all the time on men and fathers. But it was obviously very problematic for men because it almost removed care as an option for them, because it made them feel like they're in the dark. They don't get a voice in this matter. They often report, as we know, that family-friendly supports don't seem to be available to them, or at least they're not targeted at them, so they perceive that they're not available to them. So what if they want to care? And we obviously saw in our research together that most men expressed the desire to be more involved in care, didn't they? It was really important to them.
Yes. It seemed to be I suppose a more contemporary father thing, more just today's society seems to have moved on in terms of what men want compared to their fathers before them.
I think that's definitely shifting.
Why do you think that's the case? Why is it that fathers, do you think, desire to be more hands-on nowadays?
Well, I think that what it means to be a man and what it means to be a good father is changing slowly over time. Obviously, we kind of have these kind of social norms or expectations about what people should or shouldn't do depending on their different groups. So for women, there's always been these kind of strong, intensive mothering ideals, and being a good mother's viewed as being completely, intensely committed to your children's every need, in all your time and energy. And that's what it means to be a good mother. And that's been historically, the case. So that's been very different to how previously society has viewed what it means to be a good father, which has past being someone who provides for his family, and he's the breadwinner and he comes home, and that you're a good father as long as you're doing that, and you may be doing a little bit a little bit of other things. But I think we're still in transition, and what it means to be a good father is changing and has been changing over time, and more intensive parenting practices I think are becoming increasingly relevant to fathers. And I think it's good that we're shining a light on this, because it's not really beneficial for men to be taken out of kind of that equation of being in care, because it's human nature to want to care, build relationships especially with your children. And the amount of times you hear men at the end of their careers saying the biggest regret is that they missed a lot of their children growing up. It's a few bits of research now on the negative impact on the well-being of fathers and the problems. They've not got a work-life balance. If we're talking about work-life balance, historically, men haven't had that, have they? They've had work, and not that's kind of been where it is. So it's definitely changing, and they're realizing that, I think, increasingly, that maybe that there's more to it, and social norms are changing, so there's a bit more of an expectation. I still don't think it matches the expectation placed on women as mothers, but it's shifting. So I think they're kind of in this transition phase going on for a while.
So do you mean that whilst we're seeing an emergence of more men talking about being hands-on fathers, so they're making it, what I love is these conversations that we're seeing on social media and in the news and all of that more men are willing to step up and say, yeah, I'm a stay-at-home father, or I took shared parental leave, or I am very active and share equal responsibility with my partner. But what you're saying, what I just heard, I think, is that whilst men are now starting to be more open, society hasn't quite shifted in the same way for women. So women are still the main carer.
Well, they still are, yeah. But I mean, because also it hasn't fully shifted for men. This is why I'm saying it's in transition. So while I think more men are standing up and saying that, they're still not the norm for them to do that. And so there's still a pressure for them kind of to whatever this whole notion of being a man is. So, I mean, you can think about do you remember the Piers Morgan whole papoose thing, which is hideous. Mocking poor Daniel Craig as not being a real man because he carried his baby on his chest. It's a lovely, beautiful, very manly thing to do.
And I loved what happened off the back of that, though, didn't you? I mean, this Twitter feed just went bananas, so many men posting photos. I loved it.
Which was fantastic. My husband did the same, actually. He posted one as well. But and I think that that's great, but there's still that very popular media. It's still out there, that voice of you're going to basically, it's like playground made fun of. If you step out of the line of what we say is the normative behavior still, you're still going to risk getting some kind of backlash. And you still see it. So you see it anytime you look on like Twitter or on social media, if something posted, maybe encouraging, slight shifts in masculinity or fatherhood, there's so much backlash. Having like little boys pushing a doll's pram, which is one of the things I know that really annoys me because I have a little boy as well. And, he's very caring and loving. And it really annoys me that, that lots of people get really riled up about this still.
I know. I was talking to a good friend of mine, actually, and she's got 2 girls and a son. And the son enjoys dressing up in a little dress. And he'd like to go to nursery in a little dress. And she's quite relaxed about it, and she's fine for him to do that. But if her husband spots it, he gets quite annoyed about it. And he'll be like, what are you doing? We'll take that dress off. It's quite a big thing for him. He doesn't want his son dressing up in a dress and going out in public.
And if you actually try and think about it, stepping outside of our society and our norms, that it's kind of silly. It's just a piece of material in a certain way. I mean, who designates that to one gender? Or my son kind of had the same thing because he found pants really uncomfortable for ages. And he was like, wanting to, just for comfort reasons, why does he have to have these restrictive things around him? Why can't he have a dress on? And so it's the pressure. And I especially hate the things to do with children, young boys not being able to express caring without being mocked. They're wanting a baby doll, or they're wanting to push a pram, or they're wanting to do all of these things. It's from a very early age teased out of them. And I just think that, what are we saying about caregiving? It's something do we tease people for caring? They might, the danger that they might grow up and be a good dad if they, what an awful idea. So just while it's changing, change is slow when it comes to social norms. So I think we're in transition, which means that the men who are standing up and saying, well, I'm taking this leave and I am doing this, they are brave and we need more of them. And I think that's a really good thing. But I don't think it's yet easy. I don't think a lot of men, well, especially the men I speak to in my research as well, they don't find it easy even when they want to do it. They imagine all kinds of things might happen. And sometimes they're right. Sometimes it's more what they're scared of and it's actually going to be fine. But other times they're right. It might not be that easy for them.
Yeah, and the repercussions could be, multiple. So a lot of men are saying, that it could be potentially detrimental to their career. And a lot of the things, the reasons why they might hesitate could be around, financial, but also perceptions. I was reading the chapter of the book that you wrote, Rethinking Work-Life Balance and Wellbeing and the Perspectives of Father. And at the beginning of that chapter, you give the example of Mark Zuckerberg, the chief exec of Facebook. He took 2 months parental leave. And it was all in the news. I mean, it was pretty big at the time, wasn't it? And actually, we're still talking about it now, which just shows how impactful him taking some time out, being a chief executive of a global multinational company. What's the impact of those types of stories, and how important is it for the senior leaders, I suppose, to be living and role modelling different behaviour?
Yeah, so this is a chapter led by one of our PhD students, Claire Stovell, and she's doing some really interesting research around this. But in terms of the opening example of Mark Zuckerberg, I think it is really important because we're making male caring more visible and more normal rather than kind of problematic. So I think it's really important in that sense. But I think the problem with kind of very high celebrity examples, while we still need them, you can see how individuals kind of in the normal world or could easily argue that his life is and his options aren't relevant to them.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
They're too far. He's kind of almost too far removed to be a real on the ground role model or represent what's possible. So they could easily dismiss it as, that's great for the CEO of Facebook in his bubble or something. So I think what is even more important, I kind of already just mentioned that these men who are saying, I'm taking this leave, and they are showing themselves to be more active in caring, that's important. And in organizations, if you're at all in charge of employees, so senior managers, middle managers, line managers. So I think that's where setting these kind of examples and really shouting about it is really important when it's in your direct vicinity and people are saying, well, this is what we're all doing. But we hear way too often in our research about men who hide their fathering in the workplace, even if they're actually doing it. So they're leaving early to pick the kids up, but they'll pretend they're going to go and see a client, or they've got another meeting, or you even hear about them pretending to be, they'd rather be ill, say that they were ill themselves than admit that they're taking time off to care. And one of our PhD students, Martin Bradley, he's exploring this in his PhD research, and there's so much interesting stuff coming out of it. So he's looking at how and why men conceal fatherhood at work. And this concealing of it is so problematic because I think more men are doing it, but they're still not as often shouting about it for fear of all this backlash we've already talked about.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that the backlash happens, doesn't it? I get and I understand why men are shying away from being overt about it and shouting from the rooftops. It takes courage for men to do that. And in the last episode, I spoke to Yash Puri, who set up Papa Penguin, and he's a role model. He's shouting from the rooftops about it. He's providing a platform for men to share their stories and encourage more men to share. And I think that is something that it needs to be normalised, doesn't it? It needs to be like, yes, because then surely companies, organisations, if it's normal and if it's the done thing, there could be less of a backlash if everyone's doing it.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think that's a big thing about why we need to make this normal for everybody as well, because it's almost past if you need apparently special arrangements at work, then it's you get marginalized, you get pushed out of the career progression and things like that. Whereas if everybody is saying, look, we all have what the responsibilities and things we need to do, this is not a woman's or a mother's issue, this is for everybody, and then that will be beneficial for everyone as well.
Yes.
So it just means that the first few people and then need to be really brave, and then the next few people still need to be quite brave, and it's difficult to go against the norm, but the more people who do it, like you said, there'll be a tipping point and it becomes normal. That's what we want.
Yeah.
It just takes a while, and you have to have a lot of people being brave to get there.
I'm really interested in another one of your papers. You mention and explore the topic of maternal gatekeeping. And we had already spoken about society seeing women as the main carers typically, and women, it seems, step into that role and welcome that role, and what I believe you're saying, gatekeep that role. But can you just explain a little bit more?
Yeah, of course. So just noting that what society tells us we should be, we usually want to be or become, because there's a lot of negative repercussions for not being that, as we've just kind of talked about for men. The same is true, obviously, for women. So what society tells us is our role, we often kind of internalize that as we've been socialized, like, again, we've discussed from childhood. So we're internalizing that. So when I talk about maternal gatekeeping, I'm referring to mothers actually managing fathers' roles in childcare and related duties. So it's, we often hear about people talking about women as home managers. They tend to take charge. So even when we're saying that men might be more involved, it's usually the involvement's usually directed and orchestrated by the woman. And that's problematic.
It is. And it's so true. It's really real, isn't it? And sometimes I actually have to catch myself from doing it.
All the time.
Yeah. It's not even something that just because I'm aware of it is something that women may or typically do, that I'm somehow immune to falling into it. Why does it occur? Is it simply because we've seen what our mothers used to do, or is there some control aspect of it? Oh, I don't know.
I mean, it's social norms again. They're to blame for a lot, I think.
Yeah.
So, the intensive mothering kind of ideals and what it means to be a good mother in society means that it's problematic for women if, for example, so I think this is one element of it. I think there's lots of elements, but one element is that it's problematic for women if things don't go perfectly, maybe, in terms of their childcare. If you bring a dishevelled looking child to school in the morning, which I have done many a time, not brush the hair, and you forgot something that you should have organised for that day.
Yeah.
But that a man wouldn't worry about that. And a woman would really worry about that.
Yes.
Because it will be the woman as a mother that is judged for that. And the man won't. So the man has never experienced that kind of maternal judgment before. So they don't get that maternal judgment. When you become a mother, the judgments are just flying around.
Oh my gosh.
Everyone has this opinion, and you should be doing this and you shouldn't be doing this. And that's not the same. You don't get that as a father. And that means that you internalize that pressure. You're trying to avoid that as a mother, and a man maybe doesn't entirely understand it. So if you are trying to organise things and you need to keep things a certain way, it's because it will reflect negatively on you as a mother. If the man turns up and the child's a bit dishevelled, they'll be like, oh, that's nice, he tried, kind of. Which also is really patronising to men because, to be fair, men are more...
It's really off, isn't it? It's like, so... He's just equally as competent and capable of dressing or brushing his child's hair, and yet he's given a free...
And remembering everything. And we somehow forget that we expect men to be these competent, organised people at work, but that does not seem to... They can't possibly do it at home, which doesn't make any sense, obviously.
No. What's the impact on fathers because of that, lower expectation of their competence?
Well, I think there's negative impacts for women and men, for mothers and fathers.
Yeah.
I think with women, we talk about the mental load a lot, don't we? That's the term thrown around quite a lot. So women are carrying the mental load of the childcare and domestic work, even if men are doing more now. The continuous need to plan and think ahead and organise means it's always in the woman's head, and then that's automatic for her because it's exhaustion. And if she keeps doing that, then the man probably hasn't often had the opportunity to even know what that entails, to appreciate that. So I think that that's really problematic for women. But I think that then kind of women are perpetuating, like we say, we've noticed ourselves doing it, and it can make men feel incompetent at home and feel like, well, I just won't bother then. I had one of my research pieces, I had this where she'd asked him to take the kids swimming, even though she really didn't want to because it stressed her out because he wouldn't do it right. So, he is taking her swimming and that's his responsibility, and she's written it on a chart for him. And then she packs the kids' swimming things ready for him and makes sure that everything's there and leaves the detailed instructions and then texts several times to check how it's going.
My goodness.
And then if something's not gone right, then that's a big problem. The man's left kind of thinking, well, why do I need micromanaging? And obviously not capable of doing that. And then that sinks in of kind of, I'm not capable of doing it myself. And also he doesn't get to practice, right?
Yes.
So if he's left just to do it all, yes, he may fail a couple of times, like women may fail when they first start doing it as well. If you don't let them learn for themselves, then they're going to feel incompetent. They're going to feel like it can't be done. And then the other problem is that when women get for the reasons that I've said, for the good societal issues that I've already explained, women get very like, it has to be done my way or no way. And I've even caught myself doing this as well, I have to be honest. Like, are you going to do it that way? Or are you going to do it like this? Because it's better. But that's so annoying.
If my husband did that to me, I would not be impressed. But yet it comes out of my mouth. Often.
I'm always stopping. But you see, my husband knows the term maternal gatekeeping now, and he goes, "You gatekeeping me again." And also, actually, I have had it the other way around because he's a really, really good cook, and he cooks a lot. And when I cook, he will come in and start going, I wouldn't have added that. And that drives me. And I go, well, I'm not going to do it then. So I'm not going to cook if you're going to come here. And so then I obviously think, well, that's exactly how it feels. And it's not nice. And my immediate reaction too would be, well, then I'm not going to bother.
Yeah, forget it then. Yeah. You do it yourself.
So you don't want that. It makes men feel incompetent, like they can't do it. It doesn't give them the opportunity to do all of those things. And for women, it just means that you're keeping that mental load to yourself and that constant burden. And it's not good I don't think it's good for anybody, really.
No, and I do it. I know that I do it. So I hold in my head what our daughter has in terms of activities at school, when she needs to take her PE kit in, when she needs to take her tennis racket in, when her swimming bag needs to be in or whatever. I'm the one who typically would sort out her birthday party and manage. It's exacerbated by the fact the WhatsApp group is just mum.
My husband is now on the mum's WhatsApp group.
Amazing.
And he was there's a couple of dads, there's 20 odd women and a couple of dads. And we kind of talked about it between us, and he decided that's what he wanted to do because he's kind of sick of being left out of the discussions about what's going on. And so, yeah, we made that conscious decision. I think small things like that means that now he's getting the party invites on the group.
Right.
He's having to put the party invites in the diary, think about when we need a present. And he wants to do that because he's always like, well, what's going on? And you know, mum's WhatsApp groups are one of the contributing factors.
Yeah, but it's great. I mean, we need more men. I suppose the shift we need to see happen is for women to just accept and let it go. It's not going to be the same way as they would have done it, but it's okay. The child still survives. And also for the men to step in and say, actually, can I be on that WhatsApp group?
Yeah, and it's about being a bit brave as well for the men, because it is a bit scary. I mean, I'm thinking of it the other way around. I just go on a father's WhatsApp. Do you know? It's not
absolutely
necessarily a comfortable thing, but for the women, it's very hard to let go of certain things and say, no, it will be okay. But it's looking at trying to see the bigger picture rather than what's comfortable right now. Because I always say this, it's the comfortable path is not the one to gender equality, because otherwise we'd have it. So
exactly.
We need to try and go a little bit out of our comfort zones by looking at the bigger picture. And I think this is really important when thinking about maternity leave and shared parental leave as well. Because, you know, the amount of times, even my friends, I had a recent discussion about my maternity leave. It is this notion, and our UK policy doesn't help because it sets it up this way, but
exactly.
It's not a woman's leave, it's a parent's leave, and it should be kind of seen that you share it. And I think I understand as a mother myself, I understand the kind of pull that I don't want to give up leave. But you're kind of only seeing the short-term picture. You're not seeing the bigger picture of what that sets up for the rest of your lives.
Yes.
So yes, you maybe go back a little work a bit earlier, but you know, you give that opportunity of bonding for the dad and the child. That's so invaluable. You give them the opportunity to get competent at some of these difficult things that you've had mums getting competent in. And you get them to be part of the routine, and you get them to have that really important relationship and realize that, yes, you know, it's not so many men say, I think it's most men that I've ever talked to in my research seem to think that there's a natural mother-child thing that it cannot be replicated. And I think that's so sad for them. And I also just don't believe it's the case. I think there's an important bond by spending time and going through difficulties together, by overcoming challenges, persevering through them, being stressed together, not sleeping together, and you build that bond, and it's hard. So it's not that there's this natural bond. It's just how much time and how much you invest. And, you know, if we're to do that more equally, then everything's set off on the wrong foot from day one.
Yeah, I completely hear that. And it's almost like a myth that needs busting with regards to that first year. And I get it. Biologically, obviously, the woman has carried a child, has given birth. So there is a recovery time. That's a given. And of course, if they are breastfeeding, then there are certain things in terms of what a mother might give initially to the baby. But for a whole year, I totally see that actually relabeling it parental leave within the first year and actually seeing both parents as equal players is so key to societally for us to transition into a different mindset on this. I'm interested now because we've just touched on, I suppose, sharing care equally. And I know that the latest research that you're doing, so you're interviewing couples at the moment, aren't you, with who are managing to find this balance between the two of them. Can you just talk a little bit more about what you're doing and what you're finding at the moment?
Yeah, I'm kind of building on some of the couples that I had from previous research and then trying to find more. Because in my previous research, I had a few of these couples, but not very many.
Okay.
I was fascinated. They've managed this against all odds and nobody else seems to be. Then I've been trying to gradually find other couples. You know, it's not easy because even when people think that they're sharing or say that they're sharing equally, they're not in the end. So it is very hard to find, but it's in progress. And obviously I've not published it yet, so I don't want to give away too many.
Of course, that's fine.
Having said that, I think one of the things that I'm finding really interesting is that there seems to be a lot about the man seeing genuine value in the partner's work. So a real respect and understanding for the female's career. So it's not who makes the most money.
Right.
So regardless of that, if the man clearly sees his partner's work as valuable or important, or he has a better understanding of what she does, so maybe they've done similar roles or they work in similar fields, and that seems to be a real key because it seems to give this more equal respect. and then more equal sharing. And then it seems to lead to just more kind of a level playing field where there's more continuous communication. So they're always, checking throughout the day what's going on for each other. There's no kind of one automatic assumption that one person's going to take charge. It's keeping each other safe, checking where that person's up to, weighing things up. And I think that's really interesting.
Do you think that by sharing care equally, because previous research you've focused on well-being as well as the fathering and the mothering roles and the combination of the two, do you think you might be seeing some relationship between sharing care equally and well-being, or is it too early to tell?
I think it's difficult to say. I think that I can definitely say it decreases work-family conflicts. I think sometimes it increases the amount of work-family conflicts because you've not got the automatic. Well, for a lot of my couples in previous research, it's been, so they're both reporting every time they experience a work-family conflict in their diaries, and you'll never have, well, I've never had a conflict that the man's reported that the woman hasn't reported, but you often get it the other way around. The women are reporting a lot of conflicts and the man is kind of saying nothing.
He's fine. Yeah.
So I think that there can be, overall in the couple, more conflicts when they're sharing more equally because there's not an automatic assumption that one person's going to take care of that. So, but they're not going to be as heavily loaded on one person. They're going to be shared conflicts. So rather than a woman experiencing...
Okay.
But usually also that's meant that the woman's shifted her career, changed something so that she can deal with all the conflicts and the man's protected from the conflicts. And that's not good career-wise either. So we need to look at it in a more complex way because that means that the woman's not utilising her skills and her potential because usually she's, gone to a different job that's below her skill level. She's gone part-time and missed promotion.
Right.
But, there's maybe fewer work-family conflicts. But when the couples are equally sharing, every conflict is shared. So it's actually sometimes it's kind of complicated because they're going back and forth. But people are usually more satisfied with the outcome. They usually seem to have better relationships because they're respecting one another. They're both resolving the conflicts. And yes, there's lots of conflicts because there's no assumptions. But each conflict is resolved in a way that kind of means we're sharing. So you take the hit this time, you're taking the hit next time, and nobody's building up resentment. And it's also a respect for each other's careers as well. So it's complicated. I don't think it reduces work-family conflict, but I think it means that people are happier with the options, or there's more options to explore between the two of them, which maybe they have to sit down more often, communicate more often to look through all the different options. But it means they're going to probably have a more satisfactory option available to them, and it's more equal, and they have more respect for one another.
Yeah, fascinating. I'm looking forward to that research coming out, so let us know when it does. So we've spoken quite a lot about heterosexual relationships, but these days families aren't as simple, are they? There are different family types. We talk about blended families now, where you might have two divorced people coming together and they've got their own children already, and then they might have children together and all sorts. And I think this is an area that you're also looking at the moment. Is that right?
Yeah. So one of my most recent studies that I'm working on getting out there at the moment is on single mothers. I've looked at single mothers and fathers, but this was specifically on single mothers. And this is something that I am feeling really passionate about at the moment because it's so lacking in the work family literature and therefore in policy, really. So it's all been on heterosexual couples. My own research has previously also been on heterosexual couples. And usually, two people live in the same house and they've got a couple of children and they're usually middle class. And this is what a lot of research is based on. So we know a lot about their work-life experiences and challenges. And, these are what our work family theories are based on. These are the people it's based on. But 1 in 4 families in the UK and also in the US actually are led by single parents. That's 1 in 4. That's a lot of families.
It's a lot.
And on top of that, families aren't stable. They change all the time. And I've got a PhD student as well, Annika, who actually worked with us on the Equal Lives Project. She's looking at blended families, which is really interesting because families are so complicated. Even when you're trying to define what a single parent is, that's quite diverse as well. Is this a widowed person? Is it a person who shares the care with their ex-partner, in 2 different houses, half? Or is it someone off? We've historically seen that it's the woman who there's a lot of that. It's often, 90%, I think it is roughly, of single parent households are women led. But, I think that that's kind of changing, and some of the statistics will hide the complexity around that, because increasingly we are seeing a shift to kind of a more co-parenting relationship. So, and then people are repartnering. Most people don't stay single parents. So then are they repartnering with children from both old relationships? Or it's complicated.
It's really complicated. What do organisations need to do then to understand this complexity? How does it impact the workplace?
The thing is that everybody's lives are complex. And I think that because the research has been focused on such a narrow group of kind of type of families, this outdated notion has just set in, so that most policies and work family policies, and even the whole way that work is set up, is still based on really outdated model of what a family is, this stable family where we have the 1.5 earner couple in the UK is so common, isn't it? Where we've got the woman working part-time and the man working full-time. So yes, the woman's in the labour market, but they're presumed to live together, and they're still presumed that the women will use a lot of the policies. And for these more complicated families, for single parent families, this is just not going to work. And so We've got the majority of single mothers, because this is where my recent paper lies, the majority of single mothers are in paid employment, and they're likely to work longer hours than their married counterparts. So, but a lot of them, I think it was 44%, experience involuntary job gaps or underemployment. So we see that the world of work isn't working for them. So this means that, they're obviously often taking lower skilled jobs again. They can't, we've got these ideal worker norms, haven't we? And maybe I should talk a little bit about that quickly. The ideal worker in our society again. So obviously we've got the parental norms that we've talked about, what makes a good mother and what makes a good father according to society.
Sure.
But also what makes a good worker or employer or employee. And it's just unattainable, to be honest. And it just keeps getting, those expectations just seem to grow, rather than, with so demanding, like more and more long hours, unpredictable hours. And those kind of ideal workers, ever present, ever available, puts work first. I mean, if you compare that with the kind of norms of what makes a good mother, you can see how it's immediately incompatible.
Okay.
How can you be completely committed to your work, always comes first and you're always available, but the ideal mother is someone who always puts the child first and puts all their energy. It just doesn't match. So then
absolutely,
a single parent who literally has no choice but to be the main provider as well as the main caregiver.
Right.
And you just see how it's especially challenging. So these kind of ideas about what you need to do to progress at work. Most career type jobs have these expectations of longer hours. And if you want a promotion or a higher level position, this is what you need to do. So we see a lot of single parents just have to step back from that. They want to work, but work is also very important to them and who they are, because they also face a stigma. So the single parent identity is quite stigmatized in our society still, historically depicted as not great in the work domain, being on the dole or deficient in some way, which is a horrible thing. And they carry it around with them. And all the single mothers that I talk to, that while they're not explicitly saying that, they're always saying, I'd never go on the dole, and work is very important to me. And there's a real trying to show that that's not them. And so they're
sure. Yeah, going against what the stigma is and saying, no, but the pressure on them is significant, isn't it? To try and be everything to everyone. I hear that. So organisations then have a responsibility. We've spoken in our conversation today about how organisations reinforce, men as the provider, women as the carer, the expectations that are set for single parents in terms of still trying to adhere to that ideal worker. It's all unsaid. That's the problem. It's not tangible stuff. This is about the culture of the organisation, isn't it? Yeah. So if you were to think about some key things that you would like to see organisations do to tackle this, to help support this transition with regards to blended families, single families, fathers, mothers, and all of the stereotypes that they're expecting of people, what would you suggest?
I mean, we need to see lots of examples that can help us to counter those stereotypes. And again, it leads to people being brave to speak up about their difference, or to be quite vocal that they don't meet that ideal work home, or that they're going to do something different, and that that's still okay. So if we're talking again about all the different managers, line managers, senior managers, kind of being vocal about the things we said before, about them being very vocal about and not hiding when they're doing care tasks, and whether this is because they're in a couple and they want to actually spend time with their children, or whether this is because they're a single father or mother, or whether this is because they're looking after elderly parents. They might have children with learning difficulties. They might have, there's so many different things. This is life. And it's about people not hiding that. And it's very scary. And I understand that. But I think it's about really encouraging as many people as possible to start standing up and saying, I've got to go and do this now. And I'm showing that they can still progress, that they can still achieve, and that we're not, putting all these unrealistic expectations. Because really, we just need to think about the whole notion of work and how it's structured, because it's very dated. It hasn't changed in a very, very, very long time. And we are supposed to be quite a creative society in the UK, at least for now. And so why can't we be using some of this creativity that we put into other things to rethink work a little bit? Really question, how do we make it work for everybody? Not how do we make it work for men who have stay-at-home wives that isn't the reality anymore. How can we make it work now for everybody? And we need to think outside the box a little bit, I think. And I don't have all the answers, because I can't be in every organisation. I know that it's different for different organisations, but I do believe that we have the creativity and great minds that if they wanted to, they could think of ways to do this. So that's what I would hope.
Wow. Yeah, it's hugely complex, this subject. And I think organisations these days are, because of the speed at which change in society has taken place, not just with technology, not just with the policies and expectations of being able to work flexibly, not just with the shift in norms of what it is to be a man, what it means to be a woman, and also the shift in family type. It feels to me like they're trying to play catch up and or some of the good organisations trying to do their best to meet those demands. But also due to that complexity, it's hard. We're not asking something simple of people, of organisations.
We're not. And I think that people tend to want to put a band-aid on it as well, or they want to try and fix it, but by making small incremental changes, which maybe, that's slightly helpful, but I think we actually maybe need to rethink and really question some underpinning norms about ideal workers and what we expect of people and where we place value in our society, not just on paid employment, but all the other really important care, work, responsibilities that people have more widely. And until we can make that more fundamental shift, I think it's going to be hard.
Laura, thank you so much for your time today. I've really, really enjoyed our conversation. We've covered a lot. So for people who are interested and might want to get hold of you or find out more about your previous research or your current research, are you active on social media? If so, where can they find you?
Yes, I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter, and I have my University of Liverpool webpage as well. So my email's there, and you can find all my Twitter details on there, my LinkedIn details on there. Just Laura Radcliffe and Liverpool University, and you can find everything. But I'm always happy to talk about this. So I'm very friendly. So please email me if you want to talk about it.
No doubt people will. Thank you. So in terms of the link to everything that Laura and I have spoken about today, it's available on my show notes page, which is going to be on avenirconsulting.co.uk under podcasts. So Laura, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me today. I love the work that you're doing. It's such an important field of research, and just carry on because we need it. That concludes episode 6 of the Why Care podcast. I really hoped you enjoyed the conversation. I think Laura and I could have spoken for a day or two at least on that subject. I find her systemic understanding and appreciation of the complexity of gender norms and how they play out in mothering and fathering behaviour so insightful. Do let Laura and I know what you thought of today's show, and you can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter with the handle @NadiaNagamutu. As always, I really appreciate your support of this podcast through leaving a review on whatever platform you're listening and spreading the word by sharing it with your friends and family. Once more, a huge thanks to Mauro Kenji for editing this podcast and Christiane Gross for supporting with the show notes and getting it out there on social media.